So Sir David King, Special Representative to the Foreign Secretary on Climate Change, thank you for agreeing to an interview for my book, A Restored Earth, 10 Paths to a Hopeful Future. So David, I wanted to interview you because in the first chapter of the book on climate change, I want to write quite a lot about mission innovation. And you were the creator of this initiative. I recall an early meeting here where you came to present the idea, and it's been wonderful to follow it and see it flourish. So it'd be lovely if you would first explain what it's all about and how it's going.
Right, when I first came to see you, it was called the Global Apollo Program.
Yes.
And I suppose it's just interesting to follow the logic there. I developed it alongside a few economists in particular. And the need for the program really came out of the worry that we were getting everything right in terms of primary energy installation, renewable primary energy installation. But the follow-through in terms of the technologies that were needed to match it was simply not happening on scale. And this is because the feed-in tariffs did exactly that. They encouraged everyone to put photovoltaics on their roofs and use whatever primary energy renewable source was available to them. And you were guaranteed a price if you put on the grid. So you didn't have to worry about energy storage or smart grids or microgrids. All of the other technologies were simply left out of that incentive. And the incentive was extremely successful, in the sense that we created a marketplace, particularly in Europe, but also in California, for these new primary energy technologies, and that pulled the price down. That learning curve was a surprise to everybody, the scale of it, and the learning curve continues. So as we sit here today, I have to keep following the price week by week of photovoltaics in particular, but wind turbine technology is also now getting cheaper by the week. And so that is important, of course, because it means that even without a carbon price, the marketplace for new energy installation is shifting across to renewable energy. So, for example, by 2014, the International Energy Agency is estimating that more than 50% of new power installations for electricity were from renewable energy globally. And their initial estimate for 2015 is that it's risen to 80%. So there's the marketplace delivering, not so deliberately from the climate negotiations. And that's how we win this battle. But there's a limit of the amount of, in particular, intermittent primary energy that any country can have on board. And so we need a whole range of other technologies. And so, for example, if I say energy storage represents one form of technology if it's relatively small amount of energy storage, such as in a car, and lithium-ion batteries are delivering that. But lithium-ion battery prices are coming down again as the marketplace falls. But then we need medium energy storage, we need large-scale energy storage, we need energy storage for night to day, I should say from day to night, because it's daytime when we get solar energy, and we need energy storage for seasonal, from summer through to winter. So all of these different demands, each of them is going to produce a different set of technologies. So the idea underlying the Global Apollo program was from a sense of frustration that we couldn't think of an equivalent market mechanism to drive these technologies into the marketplace. Therefore, what we felt was needed was a big thrust of publicly funded money for research and development in the science and technology community. And so countries were to be invited to increase their public funding in this area, and on this basis we could create a global community.
Thank you. And this all took place in 2014, and it culminated in the Paris arrival, in a sense, at the Paris Agreement in December 2015.
Right.
Is that right?
And so, therefore, I need to just quickly explain
Yes.
the change in title.
Yes.
Shortly after Prime Minister Modi was elected, I guess that would be October, November 2013.
Yeah.
2 weeks after he was elected, he had made a speech saying he would solarize India from top to bottom. And I took that as a pretext to fly out and meet his team. I knew the Minister for the Environment, met the same day through him the Minister for Energy, and I was in the Prime Minister's office by the evening. So they knew that Prime Minister Modi would be very enthusiastic about this program and would in fact need the technologies that would flow through it to meet his objectives. He was very enthusiastic about the program, didn't like the name Apollo at all. So he's the one who came up with the new title, Mission Innovation. Getting it into the Paris process was really entirely down to, if you like, a sparky idea, which was in June 2015, we had decided to launch the program to get publicity for it. I'd already got a large number of countries committed to joining, but we still hadn't got the United States or China on board. And so we decided to have an open public launch at the Royal Society, and while I gave most of the material, we asked David Attenborough to comment. And most of the media reported not what I'd said, but what David Attenborough had said. But in particular, he had been invited by President Obama to the White House. And Obama interviewed Attenborough that way around and started by saying, "My children admire you more than any other TV presenter." But David then chipped in saying, "Mr. President, would you join what was then still called the Global Apollo Program?" And he explained it. And Obama immediately said, "Yes, of course."
Amazing. I've seen that interview.
Yeah, right.
And it's true. David Attenborough admirably lodges the course, and Mr. Obama expresses interest here.
And so that really was the principal key, because immediately the Department of Energy picked up on it, the Secretary for Energy, Ernest Moniz, then knew that he had to deliver. And so by the time we got from, that was in September 2015 to November 30th, we had this launch in Paris on the first day when the heads of government were there. And there's this wonderful photograph that I hope you can use of all the 20 heads of government plus Bill Gates in a line under the Mission Innovation banner.
Fantastic. And this is, and that had all arisen from the idea that you and Professor Richard Layard and a couple of others had come up with.
Right.
Amazing. And where are we now? And how's it taking shape? And what do you anticipate that the initiative will deliver in the coming years?
Right, so it was quantified that countries were invited to join by showing that they would double by 2020 their publicly funded research and development into clean energy technologies. And the 23 countries we got on board, plus the European Commission, now means that by 2020 there will be $30 billion a year spent in the program. We've had a meeting in London and set out the first 7 challenges that we will approach as collaborative challenges. So of course countries will be encouraged to do whatever they wish to under the program, but the collaborative programs are arranged because it was realized that many countries would seek collaboration. And so the 7 different challenges include a whole range of clean energy technologies, and I'm sure you can access the website. But I think what is important about that is the speed with which we're getting on with this. I've just come back from Beijing. The Chinese are going to have the second Mission Innovation Ministerial on June 7th and 8th in Beijing. And we're very keen to see that we can have reports on each of the 7 projects, how progress is being made at that ministerial meeting. Now, this is a big push for every country to see. Each of the 7 challenges has got 2 countries saying they will be in the lead. And so we're now having to say to those 2 countries, get your workshops up and running so that we can have full reports to the ministers.
Fantastic. And Bill Gates has also announced an additional set of investments and also an effort to bring along other private sector and financial community investors. Is that sort of a corollary to the core investments that governments have to make, or is it...
yes, it's in addition.
Yeah, in addition to, yeah.
Right. Yes, the most interesting telephone conversation I've had for a long time with Bill Gates.
Great.
Calling up and saying he thought the Global Apollo program was a great idea. He had many criticisms as well. But in essence, and he said to us on the phone, I'm going to put $1 billion of my own money down, not as philanthropic money to be added to the public money, but as an investment into the new technologies that emerge from it. So he was saying he would like to make a bit of money out of this. But of course, this is wonderful because he then arrives on that first day in the Paris meeting, November 30th, and announces that he's got 28 co-signatories of wealthy individuals from around the world who are going to also contribute. So we believe there's of the order of $20 billion available as, in effect, venture capital money to back the new technologies that emerge. So if I was a young scientist in this field today, I would be over the moon.
Yes.
There's a doubling of R&D funds, and for all the ideas that emerge as potential market-facing solutions, you've got venture capital sitting waiting.
Fantastic. And what's your vision, Sir David, of how best we're going to meet 2 degrees with the technologies of today coupled with the ones that you hope Mission Innovation will bring to the world in the years to come?
So I want to just remind you that it's at most 2 degrees,
indeed.
and if possible, excuse me,
That's all right. Yeah.
1.5.
True.
And
Indeed,
I actually think we mustn't lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Very, very challenging, but the key thing is the market-facing solutions, which are competitive price-wise with fossil fuel-based solutions, so that every country in the world does really shift over. I think the range of new technologies goes from energy storage. I'm particularly fond of a German development there, Professor Heindel, who is showing, he's a mining engineer, and he has shown how you can take a flat piece of land, carve a cylinder of granite from below the land, using standard mining techniques, and then when you've got excess electricity, pump water under the cylinder to lift it, and when you need electricity, use the mass of the water to drive, of the granite to drive the water through a power station to generate electricity. So it's hydropower, but for a flat piece of land. I think it's brilliant. His estimated cost is $100 per kilowatt hour of energy stored, and that's a winner. At that sort of price, I think Britain would put in 100, and we'd be able to go up to a very high level of renewable energy. Smart grids where you match demand to supply, time-wise through the clock, are also a very important development. So in Britain, if we have that, plus 100 of Professor Heindel's, each of his storage devices measuring about the size of a football pitch would store 1 billion watt hours of electricity. So 100 of those plus a smart grid system, which means every home where you put your washing in a washing machine, it will only operate when there's an excess of electricity on the grid. So you just match demand to supply. If we have that combination, then I think we can roll out a very high percentage of renewables. But we also have looked at, for example, materials. So if we're going to build wind turbines, nuclear power stations out of stainless steel, if we're going to keep putting up buildings with stainless steel and concrete, we're going to have a continued source of greenhouse gas emissions. And so heading towards net zero greenhouse gas emissions, which is a critical pathway, means that we have to look at those as well. So we've got one of the research programs is to activate the research community to produce the alternative materials that can be used as building materials that are zero CO2 emission in manufacture. So
yes, just two of
just two
yes.
of a number, right.
And the role for nuclear power, I assume, in your analysis of what needs to be done, or
yes. So I think that nuclear power does not have the general applicability that, for example, solar, wind, geothermal have. Geothermal is not general, but it's quite widespread. But for countries in the Northern Hemisphere, I think it's a critical pathway as we're ramping up energy production from alternative energy systems. I think that we need nuclear energy. I think that many countries in the Northern Hemisphere do. We simply don't have enough sunlight. Britain has plenty of wind, and as we roll out offshore wind, I think we're going to find wind turbine prices offshore coming down and becoming competitive with nuclear. Of course, we have to add in the cost of energy storage as we increase the amount of wind. But I think it's quite possible that in the longer run, we're going to be able to leave nuclear to one side. Mm. The nuclear program, I'm rather keen on the development of small modular reactors. In this country, of course, Rolls-Royce has been developing the expertise for our nuclear submarines. So the technology is there. If we had existing levels of public perception on nuclear, we would be restricted to building these in existing areas where there are nuclear power stations. But of course it would be more advantageous because each unit is 50 megawatts. Instead of stacking them all together, is to distribute them around the country. And then you can use combined heat and power. So if London had a few, we would have the heat we need from these. And heat production, heat conduction, moving heat from one place to another, and heat storage are particular areas where we need more technologies developed, and that's the area that Britain is going to lead on.
Very interesting. Thank you, Sir David. It's a political question in a sense, but what argument would best be deployed to convince President-elect Trump and his coterie that this is the inevitable direction of travel, and it would be wonderful if the US continued the leadership that it has shown under President Trump?
I think the way in which President Trump is going to look at this is as a businessman. And I think that the developments in the states of the United States have been very significant. So I'm referring to the period when George W. Bush Jr. was president, when there was very little action to encourage the development of clean energy. But nevertheless, in California, Schwarzenegger, for example, introduced a major program. And so California is in the same position as Britain, really, in terms of encouraging renewable energy installations. And now we've got many states taking independent action of federal government. And as a result of that, the US already has a big turnover in clean energy production. And so I think it would be likely that the president will not simply back away from clean energy. And he has already said, in his classic way, when he responds to questions, he was asked a question, obviously I would say by a climate denier, will you get rid of all these solar and wind turbines? And his response was, I'm not going to get rid of anything that makes money for the United States.
Right.
So he did say, we need wind, we need solar, and we need coal.
Okay, interesting. And I wanted to ask you about urbanisation, because I know you've done a lot on that too, and the air pollution crisis around the world, but including in China and India and so on. How best to address that as part of the climate solutions we see?
So the way in which I approached that when I came back into government in the Foreign Office was immediately to start a risk analysis project. And that risk analysis project has been, I would say, extremely successful. The Chinese and Indian governments were particularly heavily involved. Each of those governments has taken the risk analysis, which we reported on last year, has taken that into a second program. And so I've just come back from Beijing, and in their second program, they are doing a Chinese focus on risk analysis around flooding. We believe something like 500 million people might be subject to flood risk going forward through the century on a business as usual scenario. Food production, rice crop failure becomes more and more likely as temperatures rise. And simply very high temperatures and the number of people who can die because they don't have access to air conditioning. Temperatures above the normal blood temperature, 38 to 40 degrees centigrade for 3 days in a month, are sufficient to give very, very large numbers of fatal consequences. So I think that their program, their second program, is a very much more detailed analysis of all these. It will take them 2 years, and next month there'll be a meeting in London because they are still seeking help from us in their analysis. The Indian government, interestingly, has taken this into a second phase, which is to look at this from a defence point of view and a security point of view. So they have taken the second phase into their Department for Defence and their security system. One of the authors of the first analysis is on that program as well, Arunabha Ghosh. So I come back now to your question. One of the big risks that is dealt with as we move away from fossil fuels is air pollution. And the air C2.5 particulate matter count, which WHO recommends should never be above 25 as the key number, in Beijing is often above 1,000. The health risk is enormous and life shortening is happening on a large scale. So I think this is a co-benefit, and if you like, some of the action of China and India is in reverse. It's dealing with pollution and, as a sideline, dealing with CO2 emissions.
Very good.
But the Chinese, for example, are clear that they will do much better than their nationally determined contribution declared in Paris. And I believe it's pollution that is driving that through. They said initially they would peak in coal usage by 2020. All the evidence is that they actually peaked in 2013. So 2014, 15, each year it's dropping now.
Very interesting, Sir David. And how long have you been Special Representative to the Foreign Secretary on climate change? Is this your 7th, 8th year from memory? Or
No. So in the Foreign Office, I came in 2013.
13, okay.
So this is my 4th year.
Your 4th.
Right. And of course, before that, I was Chief Scientist.
Chief Scientist, indeed, yes. And what have you learned from this 3.5, 4 years of international diplomacy on climate change?
Right. I think there's several things. And the first, I think, is probably going to be startling, which is I'm going to say that I do not think the Paris Agreement could have been achieved without the British effort.
Oh, there we are.
And why do I say that? The Labour government, when I was working with Blair, particularly with Margaret Beckett as Foreign Secretary and then David Miliband, built up people called climate attaches in our embassies around the world. 165 full-time equivalent climate attaches. No other country has a single full-time person in their embassies dealing with climate change. Right, so,
amazing. Yeah.
So we have an enormous outreach around the world. Basically, this is because we made this commitment to reduce our emissions by 80% by 2050 because we see climate change as a threat to our future as a nation. But we also know that we don't achieve this objective of dealing with climate change, making it more manageable, if we don't bring the rest of the world with us. And then the Cameron first government, 2011, created the International Climate Fund. Now, the Green Climate Fund set up in Seoul under the UNFCCC process, we frankly got impatient with that. It was not operationalized until last year. We put $1.2 billion into it. The total is $10.3 billion today from international contributions. Britain has an international climate fund established in 2011 by Cameron at £4.8 billion, and he added another £5.9 billion in October 2015. So ours is nearly £10 billion, $13, $14 billion.
Yes, it's amazing.
And we have already spent £4 billion of that in three ways, essentially, if I do it very broadly. The first, climate resilience, 40% of it working with developing countries. We go in, we want them to support our actions through Paris, and we then support them by developing climate resilience programs. But we also insist on developing with them clean energy programs, so the transition across to clean energy as they develop their energy systems. This has been extremely well conducted in countries like Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, etc. And the other side of the program has been, and this is my sort of stressing this, the importance of this, has been in avoided deforestation. Right, so avoided deforestation, roughly 20% of the funds have been spent and will continue to be spent. The avoided deforestation program is linked to a reforestation program, and together with Norway and Germany, we have formed the GNU countries, GNU, and the GNU countries are spending about $6 billion on the avoided deforestation and reforestation program. 37 forested countries have joined up. This was a British government initiative, let me stress. Now, if you add all this together, what this means is that as I joined the Foreign Office in this post, I found every country I go to keen to talk to me. It's not only because they recognize this is a major problem, but it's also because we've got quite deep pockets.
And done a lot.
Yes. And so I think that the progress we've made in that way was essential to getting that agreement through in Paris.
Fantastic. And as you come to the end of your
And by
time,
the way,
yes.
since I was appointed October 2013, this trip to China is my 90th overseas visit.
Well, that's commendable in itself.
Well, it just shows
Yes.
how much demand there is for me to go out and meet up with our climate attaches, and then open doors of ministers,
Yes.
finance ministers, and so on.
Fantastic, really fantastic. And you're about to come to the end of your term, and I wondered whether, in your concluding remarks, you could say, A, what you're doing next, B, whether you'll be succeeded, C, whether you're optimistic about this global effort that we're all embarked on.
Right. So I think the first thing is the post will continue.
Good.
And I'm sure you know who the successor is.
I don't at this point, David. I'll look forward to finding out.
Right. Well, if I tell you, by the time you publish
Yes,
this,
the book is to be published in the spring of 18.
yeah. So it's Nick Bridge, who's the ambassador to the OECD.
Very good.
Young, energetic, knows all about climate change. I think it's a great appointment.
Fantastic.
So having somebody with a bit more youth on his side than me is a good idea. So I think, and that is very important, because that was one of the first questions the Chinese wanted to ask me was, will your post continue?
Interesting.
And that is, it's an important statement about all-party agreements still being in place under the May government. And by the way, the carbon budget announcement by May is also something I often tell countries overseas.
Yes.
The May government is as committed as previous governments on this. Sorry, your first question.
What you'll do next, and whether you're optimistic about the state of the cause.
Both of these slightly difficult to answer. I will be joining Systemic, and as a part-time partner, not full-time. I think it looks like a really tremendous organisation. Jeremy Oppenheim and Martin Stuckey are people I've worked with before. They are the managing partners, and they've pulled a very good team together around them. I'm in the fortunate position that I come in after they've set the company up. So the house will be decorated, the telephones will be in, everything will be running.
Yeah, well, that's helpful. Yeah.
So I've sort of ducked the difficult time. And I think they had a tremendous reputation with McKinsey, and the new climate economy was very much driven through by them. But in addition, the circular economy, what's her name? Ellen MacArthur
yes.
Foundation. Right.
Yes.
So that was Martin Stuckey.
Right.
Jeremy Oppenheim was the new climate economy.
Yes.
So those two bits of work, large bits of work, are very important to show the direction of travel of Systemic. The focus of Systemic is going to be on circular economy, energy transition, and land use, including forestation, urban development, etc.
Great.
So if that focus covers quite a patch. How optimistic am I? As you might imagine, the more recent discussions I'm having since the presidential elections in the United States are really about managing the transition between Obama and the new incoming president. What's his name?
Yes, Mr. Trump.
And I think what is interesting there, Marrakesh was immediately in the aftermath of the election, and I think it focused everybody's minds on delivering a wrapped-up agreement. We were quite nervous about getting a full legal document together by 2018 because the wording, every word is challenged at every level. We got much more progress out of Marrakesh than we expected, and I think that might be the factor. And in every country we are seeing the same thing. People are saying, we've just got to get on with it. So I think that's the promising side of it. However, I'm stressing that it's less than 2 degrees and if possible 1.5. If we're going for 1.5, we need to be at or close to net zero emissions by 2035 to 2040, globally.
Amazing. Yeah.
And if we're going for 2 degrees, it needs to be there by 2055. Now, that's with a 50% probability.
Yeah.
These are all probability related. That's one hell of a challenge.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that the rate of the transition is going to be the key part of the process. Energy infrastructure is long range in its lifespan, 50 years. So every bit of energy that's installed in the last 10 years is going to be there beyond this net zero timescale. And so there's going to be some serious challenges around persuading people to give up on coal-fired power stations without carbon capture and storage. So we will only meet this challenge with a tremendous effort on all sides. I think it's doable. The technology side of it is attractive. And I say it's attractive because this is the world's biggest marketplace. It's estimated to be $2 to $4 trillion a year by 2020. Investments in energy infrastructure, clean energy infrastructure. And the various estimates by 2035, the IEA says we will have spent $53 trillion in clean energy infrastructure. The New Climate Economy estimated that as $70 trillion. These are enormous markets and should attract entrepreneurs, business people, and technologists into that marketplace. That's the positive side of it. The negative side of it is that the challenge may be too great. Luck may not be on our side. Those are the 50% chance figures. And we need to have an alternative strategy as well. It's difficult to talk about it because it looks as if we're talking about a fig leaf. But by alternative strategies, I mean these awful things that have been discussed, such as putting aerosols up into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight away, or not so bad is marine cloud brightening. You've come across...
Yes, I've read about this in a number of books, yes.
Right.
And direct carbon capture technologies, of which we don't currently have, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
Those would be very expensive.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge of all, I believe, is what's happening in the Arctic. So the Arctic the Arctic sea ice is melting very rapidly, which means the local albedo has changed dramatically. And so the Arctic region is heating up at more than twice the global average. And summer sea ice is close to disappearing in the summer. So this large amount of ocean is now absorbing the heat instead of reflecting it back into space. And the big and very real threat is that we begin to see the irreversible loss of Greenland ice, which means Greenland ice going up 6.5 meters sea level rise. The similar things happening in the Antarctic, another 4 meters sea level rise. Those rising irreversibly means that our international societies will collapse. Now, it may be that the best analyses so far of this, emerging largely from the United States, are that between 0.5 degree and 1 degree temperature rise above where we are now might trigger that irreversible melting. Now, that's something we, the global community, have to keep a very close eye on. And it may be that we need to start working now on marine cloud brightening so we can use it if we need to cool the Arctic down. You know that there is a high atmosphere wind that blows very close to a circular pattern around the Arctic. And that helps to keep the Arctic cold, keeps the hot air away. That has been destabilized. And so the reason right now why Europe is so cold, Britain is just outside this, is one of these destabilized lobes is now sitting over Europe. It was over the United States. So these lobes are part of the destabilizing of the Arctic temperature system. And as the lobes appear, it speeds up again the rate of temperature rise of the Arctic.
It's very sobering.
It's very sobering, and we need to get these messages out.
Yes, we do. Just as we emphasise the positive too, and the action that's taking place, we can't lose sight of the severity of the threat.
But just part of the good news in terms of land use, 4 per thousand is a very important part of that process. The use of raising organic material in cropland around the world will be a very important part of capturing carbon dioxide in the form of solidifying carbon into the soil. It improves the water retention, etc. All of those advantages have a possibility of increasing crop intensification. And as we do that, that means instead of having to expand crop areas around the world by removing forests, we can increase the size of the forests and still feed the world. That's a very important part of the whole process, land use.
Yes. Thank you, Sir Davey. Well, it's wonderful to hear you. Thank you for all you've done, and best wishes for the next phase. And thank you for describing mission innovation, and I will be only too glad to write about this wonderful achievement in my book. So many thanks.
Thank you.